Hae-eun is the class president who was cruelly rejected by her crush. He's an anonymous guy who sends her comforting songs. But what if the sweet stranger and the guy who promised revenge were actually the same person? So let's get started with the recap. She is the most popular girl in her school, not only because she is pretty, but also very good in her studies and in sports, which attracts the attention of several boys, including Won-ju, who tells his friend Dong-ho that he plans to confess his feelings to Hae-eun. However, she overhears him and ends up rejecting him. This makes Won-ju sad. After being consoled by his friend, he goes home, but on the way, he suffers an accident that prevents him from going to school for 2 months. Back at school, Min-soo and her friends talk about Won-ju's accident and blame Hae-eun for it. So minutes later, she sends a message to Won-ju to see how he is, but she gets no reply. Later, we see that she lives alone, as her mother works abroad and her father left the house many years ago to live with another woman. Later, while checking her social media, Hae-eun receives a request from an anonymous person who sends her a song that lifts her spirits. The next day, a new student arrives at school, Dog Man, who turns out to be a very famous influencer who drives the girls crazy, especially Min-soo. Minutes later, Dog Man is introduced, and since Hae-eun is the class president, his homeroom teacher asked her to help him catch up. But while doing so, Dog Man doesn't stop flirting with her, which makes Min-soo jealous. Just then, Dog Man takes out an e-cigarette, which Hae-eun confiscates, and she asks him to respect the classroom. However, Min-soo comes to Dog Man's defense, so Hae-eun stops her. This leaves the influencer so surprised and infatuated that minutes later, he does a live stream where he asks Hae-eun out. However, she gets annoyed and, turning off her camera, rejects him. This makes Dog Man sad, especially because news circulated online that he'd been rejected live. So Min-soo decides to take revenge on Hae-eun, and along with her friends, fills buckets of water to throw at her. However, in their first attempt, they end up throwing the water on the teacher, and in the second attempt, Hae-eun manages to protect herself with an umbrella. This infuriates Min-soo, who decides to hold Hae-eun while her friends throw the bucket of water, and they finally succeed in soaking her. Once at home, Hae-eun receives another song from the anonymous guy, and seeing that they have similar tastes, they start chatting. The next day, she sends him a photo of her breakfast, and he sends one of his, and so they chat more and more. Upon arriving at school, Hae-eun receives a call from her mother, who informs her that it would still be another month before she returned, which makes her very sad. Once at home, Hao-eun receives a notification from the anonymous guy who is doing a live stream playing the piano, and although his face is not seen, the music comforts Hao-eun. After the live ends, the guy sends her a message, and while they chat, he asks her to meet up over the weekend so they can get to know each other, and she accepts. The date of the date arrives, and Hao-eun attends but returns sad because she was stood up. The next day, we see her in the classroom when one of her classmates informs her that she had to go to the physics room. However, this was a trap, as Min-soo and her friends end up walking her in. Hao-eun tries to call for help but ends up fainting. Just then, a boy opens the door and, carrying her, takes her to the infirmary. Upon waking up, she sees the nurse, who gives her the cell phone that belonged to the boy who brought her, and asks her to return it. Meanwhile, Dong-ho talks to Min-soo and shows her the video he recorded of her and her friends locking up Hao-eun, and he warns her to stop bothering her. Afterward, he remembered that he had left his cell phone in the infirmary and returns for it. On the other hand, Hao-eun checks the cell phone and finds a playlist with the same songs she listens to, which surprises her. But then, Dong-ho walks in, so she returns his cell phone and then he leaves. Returning to the classroom, she observes him and begins to suspect that Dong-ho could be the boy who sends her the songs. Seconds later, Hao-eun realizes that it was Min-soo who locked her in the room, and in revenge, she decides to approach Dog Man. So the next day, she talks to him and asks to be his friend, which makes him very happy. He even does a live stream where he tells his followers that they are both good friends and that what happened before was a joke, which makes Min-soo very jealous.
Leaving school, Hao-eun tells Min-soo that Dogman had invited her to a party, and hearing this, she asks to be invited too, so Hao-eun gives her the address. However, once Min-soo and her friends arrived at the place, Hao-eun ends up locking them in as revenge. The next day, Hao-eun decides to talk to Dong-ho with a small pink note during the break. When they meet, she asks him if he is the guy who sends her the songs, to which he confesses that he is. Seeing them together, Min-soo, who had found the note, tells Dogman, and he becomes so jealous that he goes to Hao-eun to ask for an explanation. She makes it very clear that she does not like him and asks him to mind his own business. This infuriates him so much that he orders Min-soo to bother Dong-ho. Later, we see him with torn clothes. Hao-eun realizes this and warns Dogman to stop bothering Dong-ho or she will report him, which would make him lose his fame and followers.
So a scared Dogman sends a message to Min-soo telling her to stop bothering Dong-ho. After this, Hae-eun leaves, but Dogman stops her and, very upset, asks her why she doesn't want to date him since he is famous. Just then, Dong-ho appears and tells Dogman not to bother Hae-eun anymore because they are dating. Then he takes her hand and they leave together. Outside, Hae-eun asks him why he said that, to which he replies that he just wanted to help her. And before leaving, he reveals that he did go to the place on the day of the date, but he didn't have the courage to introduce himself after discovering it was her he was chatting with. In the end, Hae-eun understands and forgives him. So later, they both continue chatting, which makes Dong-ho happy. Days pass like this, and little by little, Hae-eun falls in love with Dong-ho, which makes Dogman jealous. Upon seeing them together, he proposes a game of basketball to Dong-ho, in which the loser will have to step aside and leave Hae-eun. The game is very close, but in the end, the winner is Dong-ho. So, very happily, he goes out looking for Hae-eun and asks her out on a date, which she accepts. The day of the date arrives, and they both have a lot of fun, talk, and walk around. When the afternoon arrives, they find a public piano, and taking advantage of the occasion, Dong-ho plays a musical piece he had composed for her, which makes her fall even more in love. Then they both hold hands, and Dong-ho walks her home. As they say goodbye, they end up quite close, which makes Hae-eun nervous, so she quickly enters her house. However, she realizes that she still had Dong-ho's MP3 player and goes out to return it. But she finds him talking to Wonju, who complains to Dong-ho about going on dates with Hae-eun when he had told him that he would take revenge on her and play with her feelings. This leaves Hae-eun very surprised. She cannot stop thinking about what she heard, so the next day, when she runs into Wonju on the street, she demands an explanation. Wonju confesses that after his accident, he began to hate her so much that Dong-ho promised him that he would take revenge on her and play with her feelings. In the end, Wonju apologizes to her, but an angry Hae-eun still goes in search of Dong-ho, who confesses that everything Wonju told her was true, which breaks her heart. That night, we see both of them sad, but mostly Hae-eun, who ends up blocking him. Days later, Hae-eun's mother returns, but while chatting, she reveals that she will have to leave on a trip very soon, so Hae-eun decides to go with her.
That night, Wonju goes looking for Dong-ho, and they both make peace. But while they talk, Dong-ho breaks down crying and confesses that he likes Hae-eun and misses her a lot, so Wonju encourages him to apologize and fix things. The next day, Dong-ho overhears two students commenting that Hae-eun was transferring schools, so he quickly goes in search of her. However, he ends up running into Hae-eun's mother. Aware of the whole situation, she asks him that if he truly loves her daughter, he shouldn't hurt her anymore. Minutes later, we see Hae-eun waiting for her mother when she suddenly hears Dong-ho apologizing over the school loudspeaker. He confesses that he is in love with her and asks her to give him a chance in the future. This makes Hae-eun forgive him, and very happily she leaves with her mother. However, minutes later, Dong-ho receives a message from Hae-eun in which she confesses she likes him too, which makes him happy and gives him hope, thus ending this story.
If you liked it, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other recap. Until next time!